I can't wait to share that with folks from our last webinar that we did.
Great. I think it should be recording now. Did you guys get any pop-up? Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, shall we start then? I mean, we have booked like 2 hours. So the way I thought we could do this workshop or meeting is, first I will try to do a brief introduction about myself and about Metabolic, the company I represent, and then I will ask you all, if you don't mind, to briefly introduce yourself very quickly. Then I will do a presentation just trying to explain some of our approaches to circular area development and how can we get better in that. And then I have like 2 more points that I wanted to touch upon. One, I have a mirror board that I could share with you guys to gather some of your inputs, if possible, if we have time. And of course, then I would like to hear what you guys think, and if you have questions or remarks or other topics that you would like to touch upon, feel free to stop me along the presentation or at the end if we want to talk a bit longer about it. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Let me see. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Good. Unfortunately, this software doesn't allow me to see you all, guys. So if you guys have any comments, I will just encourage you to speak up because right now I can only see my presentation. So I'm just gonna briefly introduce myself. I'm Guillermo Decker. I work as cities and regions lead at Metabolic. Me personally, I have more than 10-year experience working in 4 different continents with circular developments from very different positions, from being graduated as an architect in urban planning to working for developers, to working in sustainability consultancy, and to end up working in one of the top edge sustainability consultancies in Europe, as is Metabolic right now. So I have kind of a broad approach to urban development, cities, architecture, and how we need to integrate all the different layers in cities. Also, I have, as I said, like experience in 4 different continents working, so I've seen quite different approaches and quite different ways. So that brought me to end up being a director in the division of cities and regions in Metabolic, which I'm going to explain very briefly what Metabolic is. Metabolic is ecosystem of organizations that is based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, but with founders that are Americans. It's as I said, an ecosystem. We have a consultancy department, from which I'm part of. We have a ventures, that is a department that takes care of spin-offs from our research activities. We have an institute that does long-term NGO research. We have a foundation that does bottom-up work in Aruba. And we have a software development team that takes care of like updating our tools for data collection and data analysis, which is one of the key topics of our company, as you will see a bit later. But at the end, our goal is try to generate systems change and drive the economy to a fundamentally sustainable state. We have worked for over 10 years now, more than 400 projects in 40 different countries. So we have a broad approach to what we do, and we always intend to have the bigger impact and in the more places possible. The way we work is twofold. We have a human-centered approach and a science or database approach, and we combine them very closely. Because we use system thinking, we try to identify the root causes and the levers of different systems, and we try to create interventions for those hotspots that we have identified. But why we are different from other companies is that we do all of this based on data. Sustainability and circularity are sometimes very well intended, but they stay in a very naive level sometimes. So we like to back up everything with data and with numbers to actually understand the impacts we are generating and if what we're doing is actually working. So we tackle the root causes, we prioritize local communities, and we try to understand the trade-offs and the unintended consequences of our strategies, which is key in our work. Just to show you three very quick examples of some works we have done. Probably our most famous project in the US is the Circular Charlotte project that we did in 2018 for the city of Charlotte. The goal was to create a zero waste and inclusive city. And we can now say 4 years later that it was quite a success. We launched our innovation barn. We have more than 6 circular economy initiatives that started and that are being developed throughout these 4 years. We were able to create impact in which we diverted 15% of the waste from landfill. We created about 500 jobs and generated above 30 million in revenues, just by understanding how the city was working and how could we transform the opportunities that the city had into jobs and into circular economy. The circular economy, it's a source of jobs and economic impact that is huge, but I think that sometimes is not taken the proper attention. So that's what we did in Charlotte, and it helped us to expand our portfolio in the States. The next important project we did was with the city of Boulder, where we catalyzed a shift to climate action, understanding the scope 3 emissions. And we helped them to pilot a deconstruction and circular design process for the city, integrating also policy, but also physical and digital infrastructure during the process. And last but not least, from a very long list of projects, I just don't want to bore you, but one of the interesting projects that you might like is this one that we did in our very own Netherlands here in Europe, the city of Rotterdam, which is the biggest port in Europe, biggest harbor. And we developed a circularity program where we are working with the municipality to reduce the consumption of materials by 50% by 2030. This is going to allow and is allowing the city of Rotterdam to create more than 7,000 jobs and reduce and also including construction and demolition. In this process, we are able to generate 800 tons of materials that we can reuse and recycle. So there is a big source of income, but also of materials that we identified, and we are helping the city to become more and more circular. So this is a very short introduction of me and Metabolic. I would like now to give the floor to you all in a very brief 2-sentence explanation to explain who you are and why you are interested in circular economy. Very short, very briefly. And then after that, I will go deeper into what is a circular area development and how we approach it from our side. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a second so I can see your faces. And I hate to do this, but in order to keep a bit of order, I will just say some names, and if you can just very quickly say who you are and what is your interest, I will really appreciate it. And if not, it's also fine. I'm not pushing anyone anywhere. So Brian, can you very quickly start?
I think everybody knows me, but Brian Weinberg, Foundation for Regeneration. I think we can beat Charlotte with the 15% of waste diverted. And I'm just excited about the cross-pollination that's happening right here on the call from all the different groups. So that's why I'm excited. I believe that we can. It's inspiring Guillermo, to see that 7,000 jobs were created in Rotterdam. I did not know that. And, this is the type of thing that we're looking to do.
Great, thanks. I'm just gonna go through my screen. So, Bob, you are mute, Bob.
You're on.
As I said, I'm not quite awake, sorry. Bob Berkebile, a partner in Foundation Regeneration, and I'm excited that we can share Guillermo's experience and his colleagues with all the important stakeholders on this call. And I'm like Brian, I think with where we are in the Blue River Valley in our community, we can set some new standards for this team using these skills.
Great, thank you. Tom Jacobs.
Good morning. I'm thrilled to be here. I love the energy of this group. I can't wait to learn more about your experience. I'm the Director of Environmental Programs at our regional planning organization, and I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I'm looking forward to seeing how we proceed.
Great, thanks. Christoph Josp.
Morning, everyone. Christoph Jospe, having the pleasure to co-work as a remote organization with my partner, Nick Gazer here, and with Carbon A-List. And we're supporting the Foundation for Regeneration and launching the urban ecosystem standards. We're deep into this work. And like many, I'm excited with the pollination opportunities and more generally the opportunity to launch something better than Charlotte with Brian and Bob.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly, the connections we have and are bringing to the table deep within the agricultural community as well, knowing the roots there within Kansas City and going further. Also connections with the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers, who have launched a circular bioeconomy systems effort globally and have a heavy foothold in the United States. And then also federal governmental connections with Department of Energy, USDA, other resources that way as well.
Great, thanks. And sorry if I mispronounce any of your names. It's always difficult to read names. Jeffrey Mendelson.
Hi, everybody. I'll be brief, but I'm a co-founder of Local Code Kansas City, which is working on Kansas City's east side with local partners who are making real estate development work for the community instead of against the community. And we're building in local ownership and regenerative development principles. I'm also an early investor in Closed Loop Ventures, which is basically funding the circular economy startups and businesses, and very excited to participate with the work that Brian and Bob and everybody are doing in bringing circular economies to Kansas City.
Great, thank you. Scott Schulte.
Yeah, I'm Scott Schulte. I'm one of the co-founders of Heartland Conservation Alliance and currently serve on the board of directors and working actively on several projects. I'm also an associate professor of practice at the University of Kansas Edward campus and a senior environmental planner for a consulting firm called Vireo. And I've been working on all things in the Blue River for over 20 years. And I guess when I first became aware of the circular economy, we were talking about eco-industrial parks and but it wasn't really going anywhere 20 years ago. So I'm excited that this conversation is happening again.
Thanks. Christina Hoxie.
Good morning, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here with you all. See so many familiar and loved faces around the screen right now. I'm a community planner here in Kansas City, Missouri, and focus on systems thinking and change making with communities, really founded in a deep foundation of community engagement, really starting with the voices of the people and building solutions that fit them from there. So thrilled to learn more from Metabolic about circular economies and how that fits into community development. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, we learn from each other, so that's totally fine. Lara Ish.
Good morning. I'm Laura Ish. I'm the sustainability manager for the city of Kansas City, Missouri. Also been working with Scott for many years through Heartland Conservation Alliance on all things Blue River. And our new climate plan update really speaks to regeneration, circular economies, kind of keeping everything moving in a beautiful flow. So I'm super happy to be here and hear what you have to say.
Thanks. Jasmine Bustos.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Bustos. I'm currently an intern with Christina at Hoxie Collective, and I've had the opportunity just to join in on your meeting and learn more about metabolic systems. So I'm just happy to be here and learn more about it.
Thanks. Logan Healy.
Hey everybody, I'm Logan Healy. I'm Executive Director of Heartland Conservation Alliance that Scott mentioned. And our mission is about conserving, protecting, and restoring the natural areas of Kansas City. And obviously, when we're not in balance with nature, we're not doing right by our natural areas. And so, when I think a circular economy approach is a great way of making sure that humans are living in balance with the rest of the world and the rest of nature. So, I'm excited about this work.
Great, thanks. Catherine.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see some of the faces of people I haven't seen in a while. Good to meet you too, Grandma. My name's Catherine Persley, and I live in a historic African-American neighborhood that is right adjacent to the Blue River, which is how I met several of the people on the call. But I'm a lifelong resident of the neighborhood. We've got all kinds of environmental, green space, wildlife, vacant land, families that have been around for hundreds of years in the neighborhood. And we kind of want to do some we're working on some redevelopment for the neighborhood, sustainability, resiliency, working with on some projects just so that we can take advantage of the land. And we really kind of go from a theory that the neighborhoods make the city. So if we can get the neighborhoods from the inside out, and we kind of really are the heart of the city. So we were going to kind of go inside out and hope that we can get some of our surrounding neighborhoods to do the same, to be a model for others in the city. So I'm super, super excited about being at this level.
That's great, thanks. I haven't named anyone that has not the camera on. If anyone wants to present himself or herself, please go ahead. If not, I will assume that you're just in the listening. Okay, now we got.
I'm Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Economic Development Corporation. We're a partner of the Foundation for Regeneration, and I think I'm interested in this conversation not only for the ecological implications, but also for the economic ones. It's a really neat ability to add unique cutting-edge industry in Kansas City's Blue River Corridor, which I think is exciting for this project.
Great, thanks. Anyone with the camera on? Regan or Taylor?
Sure, yeah. I just wanted to say hi real fast. I'm Reagan Tokus. I work at Hoxie Collective. I'm a community planner there. Worked on the Blue River project with Brian and Bob, and yeah, just excited for the next steps.
Thanks.
I'm Taylor Rippey. I work with Parson Associates in communications and have been working with Bob, Brian, and Hoxie, and just excited to listen in and learn a little bit more today.
I see we have Andreas and Gail on the line. I don't know if they want to say anything. I think that would be everybody.
Sure. My name is Andreas Franquisa, Senior Research Analyst at Boundless. Pleasure to meet you all. Listening in to learn a little bit more about the project, and yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks for the invites.
Will you give us a one-liner on what Boundless is?
Sure, and I just saw my camera was off. Boundless is a independent environmental research firm, so we do independent impact assessments of companies and technologies and translate those research findings to investors and their customers. Thanks, Brian.
Of course.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'm pretty excited. This is a very big group. I do. Gail,
Gail's last but not least.
Hello. I have a long-term interest in the environment, and I am a 19-year resident of my community, and so I'm very involved also in my community. Eastwood Hills, which is has an area along the Blue River. So I'm very interested in what develops along there. And even our mission statement includes about working with nature and with the community and looking towards the environment and our people in conjunction and looking towards a good future. And I did work on the sustainable plan for the municipal farm part of our community.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Very nice to have you.
Yeah, I've done quite some workshops like this, and it's quite impressive the amount of people that we have here. So I will try to keep the part where I'm talking to the minimum, so that we can have more an engaged discussion, and as you guys said, cross-pollinate each other with some of your knowledge. I will share my screen back. Please interrupt me if you mind. Let's see. Yeah, now you should be able to see my screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. Okay, I'm gonna start. As I said, if you have questions, just ask them out loud. I'm gonna do a short presentation that has 4 points. The first one is why we need a circular built environment. The second one is actually what that means. What is the definition of circular built environment? The third one is gonna be talking about how can we enable a circular built environment, and here's where we're gonna talk about the material flow analysis methodologies. And the fourth and last point, and that I hope it open up to a conversation, is what about the Blue River Valley? So let's start with the beginning. Why do we need a circular built environment? We need a circular built environment because we have been living in an economy that is based on an extractive linear model. We just take, make, and dispose the materials without thinking what are we going to do with them afterwards, and where are the materials coming from. So this, I always put the example, like it's like if we will be eating at home and throwing all the garbage to the floor and leave it there. At a certain point, the room will be filled with garbage, and we will not be very happy. We now recycle less than 10% of the materials we dispose, and 1% of the materials we dispose are recycled at high value. So this is pretty bad, to be honest. And this leads to what? To understanding that in the 2020, it was the first time man-made materials were overweighting the total mass of life on Earth. So we are seeing a shift on the balance of things in our planet, and we have so many materials that are man-made produced that we need to really start thinking about how are we going to take care of them. Not because of we are very good people, but because this is going to start affecting us. And if we are very good people, that's even better. What is important to understand about this is that every time we consume a material or consume a product, we just see the product itself, but we don't think about the embodied impacts that it has. So if we are drinking from a bottle, that bottle had energetic cost, had some material cost, and it cost someone a lot of time and money. So we need to start thinking about what are the embodied costs of the things we consume. That's the first step to start a mindset change that is so needed in our society. Why are we doing this? And I go back to the balance between biomass and man-made produced materials. It's because we are exceeding the planetary boundaries of the Earth. We are seeing how we are polluting too much. We are affecting the biosphere. We have the Earth cannot take as many biochemical flows as we are putting on it, and we are starting to see how the Earth is reacting against it, and how we are creating unlivable conditions in certain areas. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but at the end, the goal is that we live within our planetary boundaries, that we don't require too much to the earth and that we don't throw away too much to the earth. That's why we need to stop thinking in the linear economy where we take, make, and dispose, but we need to start thinking about the circular economy where we use, repurpose, and so on and so forth. This circular economy needs to be based on an holistic approach. We, as Metabolic, like to say that we believe that a better holistic approach is what we call the 7 pillars of circular economy, where we look at materials, energy, water, biodiversity, society and culture, health and well-being, value creation, all under the lens of equity, resilience, and transparency. So this holistic approach is going to help us not only to identify the embodied responsibilities of creating a product, but also to understand what it means for the society where it's done, and what it means for the value creation, what it means for the biodiversity. So this holistic approach is going to help us to keep and maintain the balance in the system we are living in. And again, I'm going to refer several times to the system. We live in a society, there's a system, and we need to try to identify the root problems and use the levers that we see to improve it. Why are we talking about the Blue River Valley and why this is interesting for the Blue River Valley? Because cities are key leverage points. They occupy less than 3% of the global surface, but they consume about 75%, and they produce about between 60 and 80% of the greenhouse emissions. So they are key leverage points if we want to start changing and improving our impact. If we look a bit more in detail of the example of a country like the Netherlands, we can see that here the material consumption of the cities is about 40%, and 85% of this 40% is in the use phase of the city. It's not the construction, but it's the use phase. We can see similar numbers for materials and the climate impact. I'm not going to get too deep into this. I will share this presentation with you later, but I do think that it's important that we touch upon all the points prior to go deep. So seeing this as from a broader perspective, what we need to understand is that we need to transform the economy. And one way to do this is radically change the way we design, plan, and develop cities. And within cities, we have area developments such as the Blue River Valley that could be a leverage point and could be an example in the same way the city of Charlotte is being an example for other cities in the US to develop circularity programs. If we go to the definition of what a circular urban development is, this is not other thing that a space that provides life, work, and relax for people that live there, which is basically what an area development should do, but also where the built environment is designed to close resource cycles. So it's where it's designed to create circular system. It's not designed to continue with the old paradigm of take and waste, use and waste, but to create these circular systems that of which we will be talking about. So at the end, what we need to understand is that cities and as part of the cities, the area developments such as the Blue River Valley are metabolisms. We take inputs, we use them, and we generate outputs. What are the inputs? Usually it's energy, water, and materials. We transform it into products by industrial processes or other processes, and we generate CO2 emissions, water waste, and other types of material waste that need to be taken into consideration. Another important point of this is the scale. Circularity is very much affected by the economies of scale. So if we try to develop a circular system in our bedroom, it's going to be complicated because we need inputs and outputs, and the metabolism of a city is way more proclived to generate the inputs and the outputs it needs for itself. So economies of scale are very important while we are designing a circular system. When we look at circular systems, we need to pay attention to the material flows, as I was saying before, that are represented by information flows and data. But not only that, there are other layers that have a deep impact in creating the right conditions to create an environment that is supporting the circular economy. And those other layers that we need to pay attention to are policy and community structures, the spatial conditions of the place itself, the physical infrastructure and the digital infrastructure. We are talking about, for example, reuse facilities or collecting materials facilities, or we are talking about digital twins for buildings or material passports if we talk about the digital part. And what is also very important to understand is we still live in a physical world. So the physical geography and the local environment are also key to and have a big impact in how to create a circular process and a circular economy. So maybe creating a circular business case in Boulder is not the same as in Charlotte, and it's not the same as in Kansas City. So all these layers need to be studied and taken attention to so that we can create a adaptive and resilient circular business model. How can we do this, or how can we start with this, is through our material flow methodologies. The way we approach understanding existing linear system is through our 5-step analysis, or our first 5-step strategy, where we first analyze the current state, so where we are at. We go later to the goal setting. We select interventions that identify the leverage points of the area. And then we go to implementation and to monitoring. These 5 steps are key to actually create positive impact, because many projects that focus on circular economy, we have seen through the years, then focus on the step 1 and step 2, or maybe step 3, but then they get lost in action. So I think it is very important to understand that we need to create complete processes in order to be successful. Otherwise, the current system or the current economy is going to overrun our proposals, our good intentions. I'm going to go very briefly through all these 5 steps, but okay. So first step, the current state analysis. What's the goal of this? Is basically map the impacts and identify the root causes of what we have now, or the system we are dealing with. How we do that is, as I said before, the first step, what we like to do always is this material flow analysis, that here you can see an example, where on the left you have all the things that as a city or a area development needs or consumes. On the center is which part of the city is consuming those materials, and on the right part you have all the outputs. I don't want to stop too much in this, but I think it's important to understand that, as I showed in the previous slide, that inputs, the city, and the outputs, those 3 steps are important. As a part of this current state, we also develop a socioeconomic analysis and analysis of the policy, because, as I said, the different layers that affect the circular economy need to be analyzed as a whole from a holistic perspective. The spatial analysis is very important to understand how the city is designed and how can we improve that, and how it affects the development and implementation of circular programs. And then the last part of this current analysis is the needs assessment and the productive capacity. We need to understand what is actually what are actually the needs of a city, and what are the max productive capacity of that area, to understand if we need to import things from other places or we can export things. So we need to understand the city as a metabolism, but that metabolism is also living together with other metabolisms. So we need to, let's say, scale up a bit to understand how that works. So yeah, through this analysis, current state analysis, we can create an overview of the impacts and the opportunities and reduce the role. And in connect with the local neighborhoods and the locals to actually understand how the current situation is. The second one is the goal setting. We want to develop a vision and set goals. So what we do is first, with all the current state analysis, we identify hotspots and opportunities, and connecting all of them, we develop what we call a circular vision. And then together with that, we develop a set of KPIs or a KPI framework, so that we understand not only what is important, where it's important to intervene, but until at which extent. So as I said, we are pretty much database, so we need to set up our own targets and goals so that we can monitor ourselves later in the process. This will help to also differentiate the different levels of ambitions and develop also a minimum baseline strategy for a circular development. The third step will be the select interventions. To select interventions, what we basically do is an impact analysis. The impact analysis means the feasibility of the possible intervention and the impact. We are talking about what? We're talking about technical feasibility. So there is a part of circular economy that is relying on technology to overcome let's say, the extra costs or the extra processes that are needed compared to the more traditional linear economy. So technology is one of the things that we evaluate in terms of feasibility. We also do a spatial analysis that helps us to understand if, for example, we can implement like a reuse facility, or we can implement a reuse process for construction and demolition in a city. Okay, we need to create certain spaces where we can dispose all the construction and demolition materials, and where we process those materials, and where we transform those materials. So that spatial analysis and understanding where are the possibilities and the chances in a city is also very important, and as well as the financial feasibility, because we all know that as well intended as we are, even if we have a project that looks amazing, but it will not have any kind of financial sustainability, it will probably fail at the end, even though we might put a lot of energy in it. So that's an important topic to evaluate. So after having a long list of intervention, what we do is this impact analysis. This will allow us to understand where do we have to intervene in the system. And then we go to the implementation, of course, which is basically developing business cases, engage with stakeholders, and kicking off the selected projects. What is very important together with this is that we develop circular guidelines, so that for procurement, for tendering, there are some standards that are met both in the private and the public sector. And then what we do, or what we could do, is develop a set of business cases. We could develop, as you see here in the example, a new chain for concrete recycling, and we can calculate how much cost it will take, when can we get to break even, and how can we kind of start implementing this new supply chain. That always leads to implementation projects, or let's say startup phase of these business cases, where we need some project management. Here you can see one of the projects that we did here in the Netherlands, Homeship, and here there was a community developed on water, following all 100% circular practices that is actually living there for some years now. And in this example and exercise, where a lot of visitors just come to see how it works. So again, having an holistic approach to implementation means understanding the financial feasibility and the impact, and understanding that the space and the guideline, the space where the things happen and how they happen. So the guidelines or the processes that are followed to the creation of these spaces or these processes or these circular interventions are very important altogether. And then the last step is obviously monitoring. Like we cannot understand what we are doing if we don't follow up on after intervention is implemented. So we need to monitor effectiveness and evaluate and adjust so that we can keep improving and understand if our strategies were accurate or not. We do that in different ways, or we can do that in different ways by auditing and creating benchmark where we understand what is the impact of the different strategies compared to others. By developing our tools, as I said, like we have developed a lot of monitoring tools to measure the effectiveness of, for example, policy and regulatory circular applications, and we do that a lot. But the key is to understand that we cannot throw out a project or a business case in the market and think that that's going to be good for both the planet, the economy, and actually for the circular economy. We need to understand that we need to keep the measuring strategy to keep improving, understand if we are reaching our own KPIs and tracking our goals to have an insight of our own work. So very quickly, what would we like to go with in the River Valley is actually create something like this, where we can understand. This is an example for the city of Rotterdam that I mentioned before. This is a complete MFA of the city, and if we can do something like this for the Blue River Valley, that will add a lot of value because it will be a great starting point to start this 5-step strategy that I have described before, where we understand what are the consumption rates and what are the needs of the Blue River Valley and what are also the outputs of the Blue River Valley. And this is where we probably will start identifying opportunities to create reuse strategies, circular economy approaches, and other interesting implementation steps. So we would like to gather as much data as possible of water, energy, agri-food, consumer goods, construction, health, and everything from the Blue River Valley to then be able to understand what are the embedded impacts from which I started the presentation a bit, and understand what are the waste productions, the minerals, and the water disposed, so that we can create those business cases in relation to that. With the very little materials we have from the Blue River Valley, we started developing a very brief construction and demolition MFA, where we can see some interesting trends already, that there's some concrete as the main impact material. And I don't want to get deep into this. We can have a discussion later about that, but we can see that, yeah, for example, concrete is a very impactful material in the same way as steels and wood. And we can, from the data we have been able to collect from Blue River Valley, that as I said, it was quite limited, and for 1 year only, we estimate that there's 78,000 of CO2 equivalent tons emitted, which is basically 200 times flying from Kansas to Miami. So there is a lot of impact happening there, but I also like to say that where there is a lot of impact, there is a lot of opportunities. So how can we reduce these CO2 emissions? And we are not only talking about reducing, but about creating business models, as I have described in the presentation before. We can start thinking about, and here I'm only talking about construction and demolition and not about all the other topics that we can talk about, but we can start talking about changing to bio-based materials, to starting processes for secondary materials, understanding how to create synergies between the different industries and the different businesses existing in the Blue River Valley. So all this together could be already a first step or a first idea of how to start creating a more circular Blue River Valley. But again, it all depends on understanding that everyone understands that sharing their data is a good thing that is going to actually help everyone to create new business opportunities, new jobs, and actually having a positive and impact and improving the area of the Blue River Valley. So yeah, just to summarize, we need to set up goals and ambitions for creating a more circular and more sustainable Blue River Valley. But for that, we require information. So we need to try to collect the data to understand how the system of the Blue River Valley works and where we need to intervene and where we can see the hotspots and opportunities. So at the end, we can create a new circular urban design. And as I said, there are many different layers, there are many different ambitions, there are many different requirements. But the most important thing is that we understand that we are all working the same system, and probably from one output, the other can benefit, and so on and so forth. So it is important that we all understand that we are part of the same system, and that we need to measure what we do in order to understand and identify the possible opportunities and big chances that the Blue River Valley has. If I'm not mistaken, that's part of the presentation. So I'm gonna open up the floor to some questions, and later on, I would like to do a short exercise with you all for gather your inputs regarding what's happening in the Blue River Valley and what's needed to, or what needs to happen in the future. So if anyone has any question, please, floor is yours.
So Guillermo, I'll start. I'm interested in knowing with the experience you've had, how cooperative, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, are the industries from which we need to collect all the data?
Well, let's say it depends a lot. What I think it helps a lot is that we create a synergy group or a synergetic group where there is a shared understanding in society where of the goal of what we're doing. Like if they understand that they are also going to benefit from it, and that by sharing they are also going to get something, that helps a lot. There are alternative if they don't want to cooperate, in the sense that we can, for example, scale down state data, for example, or national data, that it's more easily available. But as I said, like at the beginning, there is a part of a human approach and a data approach. We need to try to work with both. In the US, sometimes it's complicated. Sometimes people are very, people don't want to share too much. They're very afraid. I don't know why.
I just wondered in Charlotte and Boulder and so on, if you created or found any techniques that make them more open or more active participants and becoming partners with us and getting really good information efficiently, so then we can all do the work to figure out what that suggests about new strategies.
Well, there are some techniques how to get or help how to help communities and industries and businesses to understand that this is better. One of them is having them in this kind of meetings, for example, where they understand what an MFA is and why are we doing this. It's not that we are trying to steal their data to, I don't know, blackmail them. But at the end, one thing that has proven to be very efficient is that you have, let's say, a government institution or a municipality backing you up, or a big coalition of people backing you up, where they say, okay, we are doing this because these people or this institution is asking us to do. So there are ways to back up your questioning. Also, share information. If you ask for information, the first thing you need to do is share information. So that if they understand clearly what's the goal of what we're doing, what do we want to do with their data, why do we need their data, it's already helping. So being as open and transparent as possible is one tool, of course. But again, there are some other data collecting techniques from national data and state data and how to scale them down that we have developed through the years and that we have proven in many cities in the US. So it's not like just scaling down state data, but applying certain coefficients and understanding how to scale down data that also help and in case there's no accessibility to certain data. If there is no other questions, I would just share with you a link to a Miro board, unless there is other questions.
This is Gail. I'm curious to the scalability of the Blue River Valley in relation to the whole metropolitan area. In terms of how much work also needs to be done outside of the Blue River Valley to get things accomplished within the Blue River Valley.
As I mentioned before, like we are all part of the same system, specifically if we are in the same city, that's for sure. So we are all part of the same. So whatever is applicable for the Blue River Valley is probably applicable for the city of Kansas. But so it's all interconnected. I lost my thought 1 second. I wanted to say something. One thing that we do a lot, and sorry that I had this blackout. One thing that we do a lot is if we go to a city where there's a lack of data, and we are doing this project for Charlotte, or we're doing this project for Boulder, or I'm doing now projects with the city of Austin. I'm doing projects with the city of Philadelphia, city of Cleveland. We also provide what we call a backup analysis. So it is very important that cities and US start collecting cities and communities, and I'm not talking about public sector per se, but I don't mind if it's public or private, but it's very important that cities are starting to collect certain types of data. We cannot live in a system where we don't know how much water we are consuming or how much energy we are consuming. So what we do is we analyze what is the data availability from a city, and we say where are the gaps. So, okay, guys, you need to start collecting this, and this data. Because if we don't have that data, it's going to be very difficult to understand what's the actual current state. So just by understanding where the gaps are, we help a city a lot. Because the step of starting collecting that data is actually the step number 0. If you don't have that, you cannot have any of the other steps. And I'm using this as an answer to your question, because whatever we do or we conclude for the Blue River Valley is going to be probably we can extrapolate that to the whole city of Kansas. Ideally, if you ask me, what we should be doing is doing first an analysis of the whole city and then go deeper into the Blue River Valley. We're using a different approach. We're going from the Blue River Valley to the city, which is also something that we can use because we have the drive of people like Brian or Bob and you all to do so. But what we would like to do is expand the analysis of what we're doing. I don't know if that answers your question, but I tried.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm pasting on the messages of the call a link to a Miro board. If you are also kind to go there And I would like to use this also as a way to spur questions in a conversation, because I think your knowledge of the region and what's happening there is so valuable that especially from someone like us, that we are far away. We don't try to pretend that we know better your own region, but sometimes this third person view helps you to identify what you already knew or what you didn't know of your own city. So if you are there, let's see, there are like there's one exercise. There's exercise 1, perception analysis. There's 4 boxes there. I would like you to start copying these labels that are there and write down in each box the key qualities of the Blue River Valley, what needs to be changed in the Blue River Valley, what are your personal ideas about what could we do in the Blue River Valley or how to improve it, and what do you think are the key interventions or next steps for the Blue River Valley in order to transform himself into a more circular area. And then we can just go through them and have open discussions about them. I will let's say it's I don't know what time it is there. It's like 8 or 9. 9.
It's 9.
Yeah, let's try to write down, and when I see that people stop writing down, I can go back to and start opening up the floor and reading whatever is written there.
Okay.
Can give everyone a couple more minutes, and then we can start reviewing first thoughts that came out of these questions. Okay, maybe we can start checking what's in there. 1 second. Okay, if we go to the first box, key qualities of the Blue River Valley, what helped us move forward. This is a very important question because it's important to understand what are the core qualities of a place in order to reinforce them and protect them. Because sometimes when we develop new strategies, we forget about what's the identity and the idiosyncrasy of a place. I don't know if any one of you wants to comment something or comment what you guys have written. No, then I will go through some of them. I can read eco-industrial, relationships to waste, each neighbor culture, companies that were here, committed residents and businesses, NGOs, history of community, relationship to river and economy. The riparian corridor is already doing a lot of great carbon sequestration and can do even more. Residents are engaged and informed, history as a destination site, existing neighbor, transportation and infrastructure, relationship to the river. Yeah, so basically what I see, it's a lot of the pre-existing conditions. So the historical value, the geographical value because of the river, the natural value, and the cultural value. I see a lot of neighborhood and cultural touches here. And so this is something that we can take and move forward if we want to start doing deeper engagement with the Blue River Valley. Also, what's good already happening, the carbon sequestration, and something that we should reinforce. So this is all great. Any comment about it? Anything that surprised anyone? Everything was as expected. You're a difficult crowd. Okay.
Don't be afraid. I can read the next one, Guillermo.
I don't mind. Go ahead.
So the next one is that the pink one?
Yeah.
Okay. What holds us back in the Blue River Valley? Fear of change. Today's massive flooding in St. Louis is a good reminder about Blue River floodplain. Polluted land and natural resources, fragmented ownership, lack of vision, lack of investment, government and private, understanding of circular economy as economic, 15% solid waste bulk pickup, companies not responding to data requests, lack of ownership or responsibility from stakeholders. City of Kansas City. And on the ideas, I don't know, does Christina or somebody want to read this one?
Sure, happy to. That's the yellow one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Share your ideas for the Blue River Valley. Furniture upcycling for bulk pickup. Invention. Sustainable jobs, healthy food, quality homes, and strong self-directed community development and wealth building. Regenerative industries that complement and enhance the natural and community context. Region's premier and equitable outdoor recreation area and education area. Green infrastructures. Fully restored and connected greenways and trails, floodplains, forests, and wetlands. Transparent methods for data collection. The most connected, diverse, eco-friendly community in the city. Great vision.
Okay, if this is like, I mean, for me, this is like great. Having your inputs on this is super valuable. Now the question is, how can we make this happen? What are we lacking to actually reach or move forward towards these visions? Is it investment? Is it help from the public entities? Is it more like private-driven interests? Why are we not? We are moving forward, but why? What is holding us back in that sense? Like, it's going a bit back to the previous question, but it would be interesting to understand, and maybe this is not an exercise for now, but to see how we can connect these different boxes. Because at the end, like, what is holding us back is what is impeding that we reach our visions and achieve our goals. So it's important to do the exercise later on of connecting them one to the other. Because if we want to go to the last box, which are the key interventions or next steps for the Blue River Valley, so it's basically what should we do next. What we read here is, first one is act. Protect the communities, people, and nature from further pollution. Establish formal partnership for regenerative action. Reforest and revegetate existing public land. Protect private land and complete multi-use trail connections internally and regionally. Work from ground up, fix the land, and I cannot see something else. Community and built environment. Avenues to reward activities via UES, urban ecosystem standard, data coup, get an inventory of the resources that are there, economic and industrial, recycle organizations, mutual trust, a menu of public, private, and philanthropic funding options. Okay, this is great. Thanks. This is a very good. These are all very good inputs that we can certainly use for having developed this further. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious also to hear you all. Like, how do you feel is the momentum? Do you feel that there is a big drive to move towards creating a more circular neighborhood? Or do you feel that it's more still like some people are pushing it and the rest are more like standing behind?
I feel like I feel like people, for the most part, I'm talking about the city folks mostly, they're still trying to understand what circular economy is. And I always say directly after I say the word circular economy, it just means doing waste better. It means turning waste into value. And still, I think there's a lot of inertia right now in terms of the illegal dumping and just like the way all the systems are currently created and the busyness of people to like sit and listen and just like, you know, really take the intellectual space to understand what we're saying and the economic value in it, and also the that's kind of, I think it's still early in a new idea that hasn't really taken hold, I think.
Yeah, I mean, creating this momentum is it's kind of the most difficult part of the whole process. I mean, when you start moving, then you keep moving very easily, or at least not so much effort. But creating the mindset change that is needed to understand that this is important takes the most energy of all the steps in the process. So we should be persistent in it and don't lose confidence in what we're doing because it takes more time or more effort than what was initially required, because it's important that we do so. One thing that we see everywhere in the US is that it takes some time for municipalities and public entities to understand that that this is a very important topic, and it's going to be a very important topic in the next 20, 30, 80 years. And when we, as let's say coalition groups, we start creating a private driven like movement or momentum that is received by municipalities, that actually helps them to understand, okay, well, people are interested in this, and maybe we should think or rethink how we're doing this. And this that's why this kind of coalition let municipalities and public entities know how important this is. And examples such as the city of Charlotte or all the cities are actually should be presented to public entities to make them understand what it means and what can be achieved. Because there's also a big misconception in understanding that circularity is something just to, let's say, stop generating so much waste, but they are not understanding that they are also not only stop generating waste, but are creating a lot of job opportunities and an economic opportunities. So that's something that certainly in the States is key to make the system change. Understanding that this is an economic input and this is an economic opportunity, and to do so, we need to go through these 5 steps. Okay, we first have the current state, we have the impact analysis, the interventions, and then we develop the business cases where we can really prove that what we're going to do is actually going to create jobs and create an economic value, an added economic value. So it's complicated, but it's certainly very worthy and rewarding. So I will keep the positive attitude as high as possible. Christina?
Guillermo, would you say that when Metabolic started working with Charlotte, that they had some of these same challenges? I'm curious how you might compare our cultures as cities and, you know, what our barriers are right now. It sounds like you're recommending that we start and build momentum with an argument from the private sector side to prove the case to the public sector side. And I just wanted to make sure I'm hearing that right and just kind of hear some similarities or differences between the two places that might help us dig into our next steps.
Yeah, thanks. Well, first is what we have seen and this is 100% proof, is that these changes need to happen with the help of the public sector. Without the public sector, the market tendencies are already so clear that no one is going to be willing to change for the sake of changing. They already have their business model, everything knows how it works. So there are two ways of changing that. One is by the client saying, okay, I don't want this anymore because it's not sustainable. And then the companies are going to start changing. And the other way is by the public entities to start creating some regulatory frameworks that are going to push the private sector to become more sustainable, because there is some bigger overarching goals that we all should aim for. Because we all want to live in a healthy planet, and we want to be healthy and not living in a polluted earth. But going back to your question, sorry to have this brief introduction, is that we are seeing, and this sounds very bad for me to say, not being from the US, but in the US, we feel that in every city we have the same problems. There is no big difference in the way we see the cities approach the process. There is always a lack of data. That's the first step that we find. Like there is no, because there has never been an interest on where is the waste going, or what are people doing, or this kind of holistic understanding of what we are doing as a society. So there's a lack of data, and that data usually needs to be collected by public entities. And to make them understand that this is important, what we have seen that works very well is this kind of private driven movements, where we create some momentum and we create a plan, and we understand the set of steps that need to be taken in a city or a region or an area. And then we present that to the municipality, and we say, okay, we have developed this because we have interest in this, and because we think it's going to be important for the city, and because we think it's going to be important for the economy, and so that we don't stay back, or we don't lose track of what's happening. And then you go with this or this coalition or momentum builder group to the municipality, and then they go back to their job of a policy or a program supporting you and trying to see if this moves forward. But yeah, that's how we have seen that in many cities. As I said, like now I'm working, me personally, like, and my team, we are working at least with 7 different cities in the US, and we basically see the same problems, the same fears, the same bottlenecks, and the same barriers everywhere. And as I said, the first one is that everyone knows or hears the buzzword circular or the buzzword sustainable, and we don't really have this shared understanding of what that means. And the way to get to have something tangible is through data collection. It's like, okay, well, forget about circulars, forget about sustainable. Let's understand what you are doing as a city. Let's understand what you're doing as a metabolism. Let's see what you need, or what are you consuming, and what are you producing as waste. That's the first step. And with that step, then you can say, okay, if we want to talk about sustainability, or we want to talk about circularity, what you need to do, or what we need to understand, is that we need to close this loop. So we cannot be consuming as much and producing so much waste. We're gonna we are gonna create a closed loop from that linear system. And then people start understanding, okay, well, it's not so difficult. Okay, we know how much we consume, we know how much waste we produce, we know what we can do with that waste, or how can we repurpose or reuse that waste. So that's circularity. Then that's where we need to get to a place where everyone understands that what we are not trying to create something crazy. We are just trying to use the resources that are available to actually create job opportunities and improve the economy. That's how we approach this in many of our work, especially in the US.
So, oh, sorry. Were you done, Christina? Okay, yeah. So, a lot of what you've talked about, Guillermo, is you're really demonstrating the public benefit and the community benefit. And we're talking in general terms about improving the economy, improving the community. And we've been doing a lot of work in that regard for 20 years. And we've made very compelling cases here and in other cities in the region of what the overall benefits would be. But where it seems to break down is as you said, is getting any of the private businesses to believe it, to care, to actually show up. So I guess do you have good case studies, not just showing waste diverted and resource efficiency and material flow, feedback loops, but really showing how that impacts the bottom line, the return on investment for the corporations, the companies, whether they're homegrown businesses or others that we're trying to relocate here, that would make a compelling case to someone. So that if we have this public coalition that's trying to attract business here, we're not just saying not just the typical development park where we create some pad sites and some rail and road access, but we show them that you can actually make a lot more money growing your business here than you would elsewhere in a traditional model.
That's what you're talking about. That's one of the key bottlenecks. Obviously, as I said before, like if you want to push someone to change their business case, there is no reason for doing that if the business case works, as long as it works. So it is like that. There's, as I said, like there's two ways. We do have examples of that because we do also. I'm talking as the cities and regions lead, but we have this industry department in the company that basically does only that. We take a company call us and said, okay, we want to rethink our business model, and we're doing that. Most of the cases because they are being pushed by the clients, so they have the market requires that they change the business model. And we help them to do so. So we have all these business cases developed for companies where we help them to change that. And again, the other part is that's the change from a client-driven perspective. And the other part is the policy-driven change that I was referring to, where you have to, or the municipal or the public entities have to create a legislative work actually pushing companies to change their business model in order to protect, let's say, the whole society from the byproducts or the harming byproducts of those processes. So I don't know if what you are asking me is to share some of these business models. Usually it's a bit complicated because all these things are under non-disclosure agreements, obviously. But I think that is from what your question, what I think I could do is try to, without getting into the detail, I could try to sketch out 2 or 3 examples of, for example, like a tech company or a construction company and try to sketch out how that would work and what would be the big numbers of it. And I think that that's already something good that we could try to use to, share with these companies. I'm also curious, Scott. You said that you'll be working this for quite some time, and you mentioned that private sector wants to see the return of investment and then they will try to think about it. Are there any other key barriers or bottlenecks that you have identified in these years?
I mean, well, there are several in this region, but I mean, again, like you said, they're not unique to this region. I've done a lot of work in the Omaha, Nebraska, Council Bluffs area, and seen a lot of the similar things. The political fragmentation is just, well, I think, studies have been done that have shown that the Kansas City region is the most politically fragmented region in the United States. Now, so we've got state lines as well as county borders, city, municipal. So you have a very patchwork of you have a patchwork of entities, and then a lot of distrust and competition between and among those entities as well. So that's a big part of that's something we always deal with it. As I said, getting anyone to care when they're busy. So Brian mentioned that before. When everybody's busy, we've done many of these types of processes over 20 years, and usually you don't get many of the private sector folks to show up until the very last meeting when you think you're about to get it enacted at City Hall or whatever, and then they come in and they veto the entire thing. So having a better hook to get them interested up front, to actually invest some time in seeing how they can grow their business, how they can actually do better. I mean, that's always been a challenge. I've been saying for a long time, we need to make a very compelling case that people can save the world and get filthy rich doing it. But we've never had really never had the data that's been that compelling to hook people in, and then overcome this fragmentation by having that vision that's compelling that people want to cooperate in, instead of just competing with each other, doing business as usual.
Yeah, thanks. That's quite interesting. Yeah.
Brian, we can't hear you. No, you're gone.
Well, while Brian's working it out, I'm just going to say I'm not being cynical. The definition of insanity is that trying to do the same thing again and expecting a different result. And I'm trying to figure out what's the thing that we can do differently that will help us move things forward. But I guess back to one of your original points on the public sector, I see more momentum now in this geographic area, and in what we're trying to do on the public sector with the various partners, and willing to work across municipalities and state lines and everything that I've seen in 20 years. So I do think that public momentum is there if we can just layer in the business case and really hook the private sector in.
Yeah, that's great. And I really like, I know you're not very cynical. I mean, I think everyone that works in this, let's say, business or sector, we have days that we see the bowl half full, and the other days that we see it half empty. Because it's a very complicated, and we, I mean, Metabolic, we like to say that it all starts with a mindset change. Like, if you don't get the people to buy in that what you're doing is, as you said, like, it's going to be good for everyone, and it's not only going to be good in terms of we're going to have a better planet or whatsoever, it's also going to have a positive impact in our pockets. Then unless you do that, people, well, care less, let's put it this way. So yeah, that's why, and I think that from a European perspective, we have seen this, that when people here started to actually care about this, is because they were seeing some effects on their own lives, and they will requiring the public entities to actually legislate to push the big companies to move a bit. So it's a long process. I don't know if in the US needs to be happening the same way. Maybe not, because it's a more private driven society, but I do think that there is a there's three different approaches: the general public, the private sector, and the public entities that need to be somehow aligned in at least the long-term goal that we need to get to. Brian?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was just going to say, I've been pretty shocked at, and I'm not throwing the city under the bus at all, but I'm just saying, and this is on the state level as well, but I've been pretty shocked at like how little information they want, and they want like the one-liner, like how could you, and I just don't feel like it's possible to explain this in one sentence or one line. It's like, it's like I said, not the intellectual space to look at something new. So just reiterating, I know that the business economic case is there because you've just shared it with us around Charlotte and Rotterdam, but I think we can refine it for the uses that we're describing. I think that, if we're looking at the outdoor recreation economy, we're having to start that from basically zero, but the circular economy is already about $30 million. So there's a lot that we can build off of with some of the existing companies. And, you know, if just to kind of round out, we are committed to doing a material flows analysis and we have received the funding to hire Metabolic to do that. And the next step after we have the data is exactly what Guillermo's been saying, which is the intervention and feasibility analysis to make recommendations on what will we actually approach. And we want everyone to be in there kind of, I think that this is the beginning of that coalition. One question I had was related to, you had a slide in there about scales. And it's always kind of been something I've been really curious about, is that, you know, from the household scale to the neighborhood scale to the, you know, we have some neighborhood leaders on the call. You know, there was a moment in time when we started having air conditioning units and we started having dumpsters out, you know, outside of our buildings. Where are we at in terms of circular economy, in terms of those different scales?
Well, this is a very difficult question. Just go back to, let's see if I can share. Yeah, I mean, if you go to, I mean, if you think about how can you make a building or a house circular, what can you do? You can create like install some solar panels. You can create some water collection. You can use low impact construction materials. So that's what you can do at a household level, let's put it this way. If you go to the neighbor level, what you can do is like, you can create heat, water, and sanitation systems that are renewable. You can use urban mining, so you can create infrastructural spaces where you can bring your disposed materials so that they can process them, so that you can start having from a neighborhood level a better waste management, especially for organics, which is something that, for example, if you go to East Asia, if you go to countries like Korea or Japan, everyone has an organics disposal system in their house, and we don't do it in most of these places. If you go more to the city level, what you need to look at is how to close the cycle for this waste and the building materials specifically, and how you can create a city that's energy neutral. So at the end, what you're looking at is reduced production and consumption-based emissions. So you can look at it from all different scales, and each scale has their space of influence. But I do not think that there is one that is more developed than the other. What I do think is that they all work in a sort of synergy, and this happens like when you look at design. You can be talking about designing furniture or a room or a house or a neighborhood. The scale is different, but at the end, the core concepts might be the same. So I think that's what I would say, that I don't think there's more technology or more there's not a scale that's more developed than the others. I think that they are all developed and they're all feasible. The only thing that we need to do is having that mindset change or this policy push that helps us to do the right thing. I don't know if this is the right answer to what your question, Brian.
It's a big question, and I think that it's a moving target. But I appreciate it. Laura, did you have a question? Or did I just dream that?
No, I didn't have a question. I had a comment because Brian, you said something that's very, very true and about the political will, especially right now for these kind of things. And I know Tom is on, and I don't know, I feel like this might be something that if we're really going to make the move, it needs to be a more regional thing because of what Scott mentioned before about our our very fragmented political piece. So I'm looking at this and I'm remembering when I was part of the Byproduct Synergy coalition back, gosh, early 2000s, when we were working on that and kind of working on the circular economy thing back then. And it was just because of how fragmented. We're talking about doing this in just a very small piece of Kansas City. And I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around how we can do it in such a small place without creating a regional mindset change, I guess is where I am. So just kind of my 2 cents. I feel for you. I wish we had the political will to make this change. And I also, and the other piece we have is when we do make really strong, especially legislation on the Missouri side about this kind of thing, then the state pushes back on us. So there's always that. I mean, Missouri is one of the few states that literally says you can't ban plastic bags. We literally have something that says anybody can use plastic bags because a city tried to ban a plastic bag. So we've got to be really careful about how we do this, and I think we need to maybe pull this regionally. But Brian, if I'm super excited about how you can all make this work in Blue River, in the Valley, and perfectly happy to offer my resources as I have them in my office. But it's also going to take a pull from our solid waste folks, and having Jimmy Lossing in these meetings and trying to get Mike Shaw to these meetings and those kind of things to really have the ear of the city manager and to make this kind of stuff happen.
I did invite them, and Michael Shaw has introduced me to Jimmy and others to give the data, so that's, I think, a start.
Yes.
So Brian, hi guys.
Yeah.
Jackson County is getting ready to become a Blue River resident over with the new jail. So this would be really an opportune time to pull them into the conversation, because they've got bunches of stuff to deal with, environmental as well as just the construction piece, as well as what they're going to do with the other building when they get ready to tear it down, when they make that move. So there's lots of, I think the county might be one of our better partners, because politically, I think they have a little bit more clout than the people at City Hall. And Laura, I just want to, and I know you've been in on this environmental thing. And so for people that are passionate about the work that they do, I can only imagine about how frustrating it is to not be the decision makers. Like, you guys just need to go do this. Get with these people, and here's the money. And so we need to just kind of be more strategic about who's kind of doing some things. So I appreciate your work here.
We all just keep poking. We poke the bear enough, it'll eventually.
We're gonna keep poking them till they get it.
Till they do something.
And Kathy, personally, you are so dialed in right now to me and Bob and our train of thought. We actually just met with Troy this week, and it was probably the best, city leadership meeting that I've had. Not that I don't, so I'm very excited about, we came out of that meeting, with some really strong actions.
Good.
And looking forward to cementing those and sharing more. So
absolutely great.
Yeah, in Jackson County with the Blue River Parkway master plan, I mean, that's our greatest opportunity to get started on it, on the largest piece of land with the greatest number of multiple benefits, on the public sector side of things. So that's really exciting, and that's really trending in this direction and everything as well. So I mean, we're seeing it in the Parks and Rec side, as well in Jackson County. But then, I know this conversation today is really talking a lot about the Missouri side, but we are seeing those similar synergies happening on the Kansas side upstream as well. With talk of multiple benefit land acquisition, parks and trails and stormwater management. There isn't any discussion of the regenerative, economic benefits beyond like workforce development. But if we can show that we're doing it in the lower Blue River, then hopefully that's something that we can show how that could happen. On the Kansas side, even though the Kansas side is more more suburban residential.
Yeah, I love that.
And with the solid waste, we have had cross-state line work. Mark is working on it, and I've told you about this before. Kathy and I are both on the solid waste group that's working on the illegal dumping. And they also have Johnson County, Wyandotte County, and the consolidated government, and they have Independence and Kansas City, I think, are all the entities right now that are working on that. So there is some cooperation, at least on the illegal dumping, and maybe we get tied in with some of those people. And like you mentioned, Michael Shaw, I think that's excellent to get him involved with it and all. And what we need to do, and I'm sure you know this, is we need to find some advocates that will help build those bridges to some of these other entities and other public groups that we need to be working with. But you're right that as been mentioned before, there's a lot of competition sometimes, but there are also opportunities for synergy that I think we need to build on. My other comment or thought that I had listening to some things earlier was whether there's some of the mindset difference from Europe and all, is that there's a difference in temporal ideas in terms of a lot of development is based more on short-term thinking rather than long-term thinking in the US. And then how do we get businesses to think long-term? Do any of them even work beyond 5-year plans anymore if they do that? So is there some way of us getting to the mindset in some way of hitting at long-term goals that some businesses may have or may need to think about? Like with maybe mentioning climate change or something of the sort, so they have to start thinking farther out than short-term gains for their business. So
these are great.
Anyway, I'm just curious about that because I think I see that as a lot of a problem with many businesses is they're thinking too short-term. So how do we get them to think long-term, temporally, but what we're also having to do is have them think beyond themselves. How do they think globally instead of, we go to local, we go to state, we go to country, we go to global. So we're having to expand people's minds in some way, both temporally and in terms of impact on humanity as a whole.
Gail, that's well put. That's well put. And as you know, we're recording this, so we're going to play that back to some of these potential partners.
I see Christoph has his raised hand, and just so you know, Christoph is kind of like the metabolic of ecological assets, with his company Carbon A-List, and he's a really profound thinker. And I'm really happy that he's in this conversation so that you, Gail, and Kathy, and others, and Scott can meet him and get a sense of him. So that's my hype. I'm his hype man.
Good job.
Thanks for being a hype man, Brian. And thank you, Guillermo and team, for a really stimulating conversation. I guess I'll make a comment first, and then I have a question both directed at Metabolic as well as the Kansas City folks, as well as the Foundation for Regeneration around data. Guillermo, I appreciated your comment that the gaps in the data availability makes it more difficult to do a material flow analysis in this whole space. And it seems to me as if there could be low-hanging fruit where the city, without needing to pass legislation that costs any money, might be able to pave the way to some degree to help the availability of that data to better assess where the opportunities are, and similarly maybe have citizens who have great awareness of activities going on to contribute to a more holistic and comprehensive understanding of the space. And to Brian, the urban ecosystem standard may play a role in streamlining data flows into this domain. So yeah, would be curious, sorry, Laura, to put you on the spot, but from your perspective, might there be an avenue where data needed to better understand both baselining from a climate action plan perspective and like things that ultimately maybe help some of the industry players who are doing great things and streamline some of their activities? And then like, is there something we could get done and push? And just to be a hype man for my partner, Nick, on the other side here, and our work with the American Society for Agricultural and Biological Engineers, which is an accredited standard body. We use standards all the time, and it's kind of like capital S, lowercase s. And today, urban ecosystem standard is very much lowercase s, though it could become a capital S standard when bodies that, think like engineers and have streamlined ways can come into play. So I'm just multi-layered question, but curious on, perspectives around data to help fill in gaps and low-hanging fruit there.
One, I would love to have the ecosystem standard be a capital S with an exclamation point in bold. So super important. I think that yes, making that data case would be useful. And I think that that's how we push back in council, is to have that data. Now, figuring out how we organize that data to best make the case, that's going to take some time and effort, and I'm all in. Having missed kind of the first part of your conversation, I've got 2 little ones at home. I apologize. I'm willing to have an offline conversation with you about it, or if you want to reiterate what else you need from me.
I understand.
We get it. All good. No, I mean, it just to, so from a city council
And I'm not
perspective,
sure, everyone in the room knows what the urban ecosystem standard is. So just FYI.
So the urban ecosystem standard is coined by Brian, I think. Maybe. I mean, it's the thing that Brian has asked Carbon A-List to think about. And we're basically taking an approach that is inspired by voluntary carbon markets, but not creating a carbon asset around it. That is a framework to collect data, starting with ecological data specific to land owned and operated or managed by the Foundation for Regeneration, but more broadly, an approach that can streamline to monitor, assess, and reward climate action activities in Kansas City, and hopefully become a thing more broadly that can support cities across the world, starting in the US, achieve climate action from a voluntary perspective. And to use Brian's term, turn what's an unfunded liability into a market opportunity for volunteers and citizens to take climate action today. How'd I do, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. My thing is that the carbon credits won't impact all the carbon credits in the world, and a robust, successful carbon credit economy will not change anything really in the inner city, in the urban core, where 80% of the population lives. Carbon credits need rural, homogeneous land. So all the things we're talking about in terms of, and so how do we create health in the urban context, health for the environment, and this just relates to like bus stops and the heat, temperatures of the bus stops. That would be an example of that, or the, urban tree canopy, or the street trees, or the air quality sensors, or the water quality. What are the measures and bands of health, and what is healthy and what is unhealthy, and where are we now? And we have the technology right now to do that in real time, using different satellite and sensors And so we can essentially, a carbon credit is essentially just verified practices that is then, sold, and verified land management practices that are then packaged into an asset and sold. So we're talking about an ecosystem asset. So this health measure that we've reached with the urban ecosystem standard is our ecosystem asset. That's why we say ecosystem assets rather than carbon assets. We include carbon, but because we're in the urban context. So how does this relate to circular economy? It's completely related to the circular economy and the data that we need for all the, the street trees to the heat at the bus stops. It's the same type of real-time data that we need on the waste. So that's why this is the cross-pollination at work, because I don't think Guillermo and the circular economy team has met with the urban ecosystem standard team. And so, we've been talking about it and hinting about it, but on the urban ecosystem standard, we've been talking about the idea of a data co-op, which is essentially a way to pay people for their data and incentivize people to give their data so that everybody can benefit from what we do with the data, which is increase visibility, increase information, and the ability to make these interventions that create new economies. And all that means on the neighborhood level is that if you provide information, you probably can get compensated for that, and or the institutions themselves. And that we don't really own our data, and so this would be an opportunity to let the group own it and do something with it, rather than people owning it and us not knowing anything about who owns it or what they're doing with it. And this data is vital to our health, and it's the base layer of the standard. So, Christoph, I don't know if I just went off track or if I'm way out of it, but that's kind of, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wanted to give Nick a chance to comment.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating this discussion and the discussion around, just in general, around circular economies, and want to ask and maybe about thoughts around circular bioeconomies and the principles that stand up bioeconomies, not just where we're at today and the linear systems that brought us forth today, but like, how do we think about regenerating natural systems? How do we input use efficiencies from a bioeconomy perspective? How does this impact our food and agricultural systems that intersect with our urban environments? How do we design with like the end in mind? So we have, again, these bio-based products and the bio-based energy systems or whatever it might be. How do we expand from the concept of a circular economy to a circular bioeconomy with local legislation, local policy, local infrastructure, program work, and then rolling up to what we're seeing on the federal level with new policy discussions happening at the federal level with the Department of Energy and others. USDA talks about the circular bioeconomy quite a bit. How do we form these connections to expand the line of thinking to really think about what biology brings into it?
I always say, to make the complicated be simple, circular economy is the technical and the biological. That's where I start. And then when you're talking about bioeconomy, I think it's the biological systems, and the technical would be like the metals and but Guillermo, I don't know if you want to comment, or others.
Well, I was gonna say that we need to have a conversation about this, because we are, and I'm deeply involved in a project that sounds pretty similar to what you guys are doing with this urban ecosystem standard. We call it the Urban Diagnosis Framework, which sounds very similar. And what you guys mentioned, it's true. And we use these 7 pillars of the circular economy: materials, energy, water, biodiversity, culture, health, and value, to identify certain metrics that we can measure in a city, and then we can give a certain diagnosis of how is the health of that urban area or city. So it sounds pretty similar. So we should have a conversation about that. And just with an eye on the time, maybe we should wrap up.
Yeah. I heard loud and clear. I mean, I heard loud and clear certain things around a coalition of, you know, private sectors. And, you know, I also think there's a lot, and also the examples, the economic examples that would support that coalition, and the data. I think that there's a real conversation around what can we do now and later around data and who benefits and why. And, you know, I think we're kind of constantly trying to talk to and are talking to different, you know, national USDAs and DOEs and things like that. So I know that there's a lot of bills that are out that, you know, this could directly support, you know, the Farm Bill, you know, all these other things that are happening. But trying to figure out, you know, if there's any other takeaways that other people had. I think Laura had a good critique or kind of challenge, which was, why are you focusing on the Blue River Valley versus the region, given the fragmented political sense, or just why not bigger? And it might be a product of our organizational design, to be honest. But yeah, I think that was a good question that we should have a good answer to.
Laura, I think that's a key question, and I think Brian and I would like to explore enlarging this, but obviously that's outside of our current funding and scope. And I do think the Blue River Valley is a great place to start because there's very serious circular systems already at work there. So it becomes a great model for the whole region, but we need the whole region in this conversation ultimately.
And I agree 100% with that, because there's people like Kathy in the Blue River Valley that I think are going to be our great way to pilot this. But just to get that economy of scale, I think eventually we do need to power that up a little bit. And sorry, Kathy, I think you were going to say something.
No, you're fine. And I guess even, you know, my neighborhood is so tiny, but we have all the stuff that we're talking about. It's the same challenges because we've got our little political factions and, you know, all this other stuff going on. And some people want to go in different directions. But my experience has always been is that once people, you know, we're from Missouri. This is, you know, and so we're the show me state. So once there's a handful of people that do something and people see a project that they can latch on to, whether they're very critical of it or they're very much in support of it. And I think Mike's around here, I think they're really doing some pilot projects and demonstrating how effective it can become on a larger scale is really what it's going to take for it to even take off regionally, just because that's who we are. I mean, it just is who we are. So I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm glad that always been glad we're close to the river. And just looking at how we can really redevelop, because we really have almost a blank slate to work with over here. We've got a lot of assets, but they're just like at a dormant stage. So lots of opportunities to do some things that'll benefit the neighborhood and the river. So just looking, you know, always have my ears open for things that are going to be more positive and really trying to do long-term thinking about if it's a neighborhood, if it's a family generational neighborhood, I really want my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren to be able to come to the neighborhood and see something that's, you know, going to be beneficial to them later on. So it's got to be work together so that we can be planning for that. So I'm all in. I'm going to collect all these studies that we've done around here, because a lot of the information that you all are talking about, we've got groups that have studied that. They've done the tree count. They know the litter count, but we do studies and then we put them on the shelves, and we pat ourselves on the back for collecting so much information, but not doing anything with it. So we need to change that mindset as well.
I agree. Thank you, Kathy. And
You're welcome.
we have some micro grants available that I want to talk to you about how we can put them to use. And so we should talk
Okay, so we got several things, so we'll just set up. We'll get offline. When we get offline, we'll set a meeting.
Yeah, you and Gail. I see Gail still on, so we really want to talk about that. And
Okay.
in terms of Guillermo, I don't know if we're about to go into our contracting call related to Blue River Valley and or the I think that we can make that decision, you know, in that call. Is like, does the price for the material flows change if we go citywide or region-wide, or is it, you know, we maybe we can kind of bring that conversation. I mean, if you're talking to, what I don't want to do is go citywide or regional wide and not, and you know, I know that puts us, you're already working with like the city of Philadelphia and Chicago and Charlotte. Like, it is probably more unique than not that we're choosing this one small area of Kansas City, but yet Bob and I thought, you know, we really want to see the change and see the impact. And if we, you know, focus our, you know, limited resources in this one area, then, you know, maybe we can get more done. And so I think that's just an open question that I'm walking away with.
Yeah, let's keep that conversation offline. I think that there's no, it depends on our goals. Basically, we need to think about what we want to achieve, and then we will find a way to see how can we achieve that. But I don't see any problem, so I think we're good.
Any other takeaways, Christoph or Bob? He says
You're
thanks.
muted, Bob.
Thanks. I appreciate everyone's input. This has been a stimulating conversation. I think it really informs the decisions we have to make in the immediate future. And I do think this is a perfect, if you will, model for the larger community. And maybe we should, as Brian just alluded, make this work in this Blue River Valley, which has a lot of assets already in the process. And then somewhere during that process, Laura and Tom and others, let's talk about enlarging it to include the region.
Yeah.
And I do think that we need examples, and sometimes it's easier to create an example in a smaller place than try to go impact big things. So examples change the world.
Agreed.
I agree with that as well.
Kathy, I'm sure you're a busy person, but I'm going to follow up by email with a request to put you in touch with one of my colleagues who's very interested in reading any report you have that's gathered dust. So.
Okay, you got it.
All right. Thank you.
The good news is that we're really at the beginning here, and we've got the material flows analysis that's happening, forthcoming, and an intervention studio of experts like Guillermo to help us locally and internationally think about what are the opportunities we want to take on to grow the circular economy from $30 million to $300 million. And I believe that we can beat Charlotte. And, we have, we've raised money for the MFA and the intervention studio, and we are in due diligence for an additional $1 million that we would put into circular economy. So this is really good for me right now because I'm responding to the due diligence request for the information. So now I can be fresh and to make sure I'm speaking more intelligently about, the group that we've assembled here. And I'll just leave it to anybody else, Reagan or Taylor. If there's anything you want to say, you're welcome to. If not, no big deal. But thank you all for coming and staying to the very end and even 8 minutes over. We're grateful, and we're excited to continue this work.
Yeah, thank you all. That was great.
Thank you all, and I'll be looking forward to talking to continuing the conversation for sure.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.